Hello, my name is Shane Ibarra. I'm from cohort 12. I believe today is Monday, the 23rd. This is my respiratory project. The respiratory system consists of anatomic structures that help us breathe or ventilate. Ventilation is simply the process of moving air in and out of the lungs. It is divided between the upper and lower airway. I'm going to start with the upper airway. The upper airway consists of all anatomic structures above the level of the vocal cords. The major structures consist the nose, the mouth, the oral cavity, nasal cavity, the pharynx, and the larynx. Their major functions are to warm, filter, and humidify the air as it goes in through the nose or the mouth. The pharynx is a muscular tube that extends all the way down that leads to the trachea and the esophagus. The laryngeal pharynx is at the base of this pharynx. It ultimately divides into two lumens, which leads to the trachea and the esophagus. The nasal pharynx, whenever we breathe through the nose, it will enter through the nasal cavity and reach the nasopharynx. The nasopharynx develops this ciliated mucus that extends all the way to the nasal cavity and down. It keeps the dust and contaminants out of the respiratory system, and also the ciliated mucus helps warms and humidifies the air. However, whenever we're breathing through the mouth, it will go through the oral cavity and then reach the oropharynx. The oropharynx is surrounded by the cheeks, the tongue, the uvula, the epiglottis, and is on top of the larynx. Whenever we're swallowing, the larynx, which is ultimately this piece that I tried to do, elevates, and the epiglottis will fold over the larynx. So then when the food will go down the esophagus rather than through the trachea, preventing aspiration. Aspiration is anything other than air going down the trachea. So right here, the larynx is ultimately it's many cartilaginous structures. It's right below the epiglottis right here. It has a thyroid cartilage, which is two shield-shaped things that fuses together in a V-shaped structure, which creates the Adam's apple. And the cricoid cartilage is inferior to the thyroid cartilage, and it marks the beginning of the trachea. And the trachea will extend down and go right here. So, fun fact: the hyoid bone is the only bone not fused with another bone. It is considered the floating bone. So, fun fact. That marks the end of the upper airway. The lower airway, it will begin with the trachea. Its main function is to bring the oxygen down to the alveoli so it could oxygenate the blood. The trachea is filled with cartilaginous ring-shaped cartilaginous structures, which is about 4 to 5 inches, extends down, and once it extends down, it will reach the carina. The carina will ultimately separate the trachea into bronchi, the left and right bronchi, and it will reach the right lung, the left lung, and the right lung. The right lung has 3 sacs, which I can't really show, and the left lung consists of 2 sacs. As the bronchi goes into the lungs, it will start going to smaller bronchi called bronchioles. And the bronchioles will soon keep on going smaller and smaller until it reaches alveoli. Alveoli are small balloon-like structures which is covered with pulmonary capillaries. Pulmonary capillaries, and once the oxygen reaches to the alveoli, the oxygen would diffuse with the pulmonary capillaries, and the pulmonary capillaries will lead to the circulatory system with the oxygen, and it will oxygenate the blood. Otherwise, etc., the blood has waste. It has CO2. So the CO2 has to get out of the body one way, and it goes through the pulmonary capillaries and diffuses from the pulmonary capillaries into the alveoli. Therefore, the alveoli will have the CO2 and it will go reverse back out from the bronchioles to the bronchi to the carina to the trachea, all the way up to the upper respiratory system, and that's what we call exhalation. So bring that CO2 out. Inspiration is bringing the air in. We also have the diaphragm. The diaphragm will contract downwards, allowing, whenever we breathe in, it will go downwards, allowing the lung to expand. And then whenever we breathe out, the diaphragm will go back up and will make the lungs smaller. Sorry, the video cut off, but there is pleural membranes, which are serous sacs that line the organs. So there's the visceral pleura. The visceral pleura lines the outer surface of the lung, and the peripheral pleura lines the inner lining of the thoracic cavity. That is enough of the respiratory system. A respiratory disease is asthma. Asthma is usually whenever the air goes through your mouth or nose, it goes down the respiratory tract to the lungs and etc. But with asthma, whenever the air goes in, the lining of the throat increases and swells up, which makes it harder for the air to go in, and the ciliated mucus also becomes thicker. So whenever the air tries to go through the respiratory tract, it's really hard to. That's why people with asthma have inhalers, which helps reverses those episodes, those asthma attacks. There's no cure for asthma. It can only be controlled. But it's a highly treatable disease. Mostly people with asthma, they show no signs or symptoms of it, and is basically 95 to 98% controlled, and is rarely shown after those treatable conditions. And that is the end of my respiratory system project. I hope you're satisfied, Garza.